it's a we thing. And once we're locked in, and it's a life thing, right? So a lot of times, people and students that I mentor, we grow together. And so I'm still growing, you're still growing, and I'm really big in this concept of greater than yourself, meaning I'm gonna give you whatever I can to make sure that you're better than me, right? And because we all eat together, it's not a situation where you're not my competition, you're not, you're my collaborator.
You're listening to Community Level, a podcast where public health research meets real-world impact. Brought to you by the Community Health Sciences Division of the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. We bring you real conversations with researchers, practitioners, community leaders, and organizations working to create healthier communities. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in on this episode of the Community Level Podcast. My name is Aaliyah, and for today's episode, Cenia and Nancy talk to UIC faculty about how showing up authentically for their students contributes to that sense of belonging at UIC and more broadly in the academic world. I hope you enjoy.
Thank y'all so much for joining us today. My name is Cenia. I'm a second year MPH student in the Department of Community Health Sciences. I can go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Tran.
Hi, folks. My name is Nathaniel Tran. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I joined UIC in 2024 as a member of the faculty in the Division of Health Policy and Administration. I am a teacher and a researcher. I teach folks early on to their journey about how public health systems, policy, and advocacy kind of works, and trying to motivate them to make a positive change in their own community. My research focuses on LGBTQ population health. I spent the last decade in public health, starting as kind of a patient navigator and helping immigrant and refugee women get plugged into breast cancer screenings. And then meandering in that path, stumbling, struggling, failing out, leaving a PhD program, coming back to academia, believing in the transformative power of education and my role of getting to be that role model for students, and then to ask questions that I think are important to the world. And so I feel really lucky to be here. I joined UIC in part because it's Chicago's public research university, right? I think that I love that it's a public institution that the faculty and the students look like the world that I want to dream up and how I imagine the future. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. I can go next, and then I'll give it to Dr. Molina. Hi, everybody. My name is Nancy Valentin, a co-host here of the Community podcast. And what brought me to UIC was just honestly a free scholarship through the COVID-19 work that I did in the years 2021 to 2024, 3 years, so like that. So it's been a really honor to just kind of continue that service work. And I'm really excited just to talk about my perspective of what I've seen as someone who was in the workforce for a little bit and then came back into the role of student, and just kind of seeing how the faculty has really taken their roles truly seriously, and just fascinated with how else I can contribute in now this space in academia. And I'll pass it to you, Dr. Molina.
Gracias. Bueno, buenas tardes, everybody, because we're recording in the afternoon. So, ahí. Me llamo Yamilé Molina. I promise I'll talk English, but I have to start with who I am first. I'll say I'm Latina. I have a disability. I am not advertising this protein shake. I'm a type 1 diabetic, haven't been for about 20 years. And if you've been in a classroom with me, you've seen a situation where my blood sugar has tanked, right? And so we're in that situation now. I also go by they, their, ella pronouns in that space. So I think for me, really how I teach and how I serve in leadership roles really comes from a space of Latinidad, of not necessarily conforming to binary points of identity, if you will, and really coming at it from somebody who has a chronic illness and has a chronic disease. And I should just throw out there, so I often say I am not a Chicago native, but I did choose to give birth to 2 Chicago natives, which is my biggest love letter to any city that I could ever do. I came to Chicago as a Katrina evacuee in 2005, about 20 years now. And I had never previously, as somebody, raised in Miami, grew up in New Orleans, worked out in Seattle. I had never been to a space where so much community could come. And so I have a huge love affair with Chicago that I'm excited about. And so when I first came here from Katrina, I had never seen as much kindness, right, to somebody who was a total stranger and was very not well, let's say mentally. And I came to Chicago in one of the most vulnerable points in my life. And I felt compassion. I felt a lot of good, constructive, get your shenanigans together real quick. And I valued that. So I left Chicago. I came as an evacuee for like about 24 hours and then left to Seattle where I was relocated. But I always had an affair and an interest in Chicago. And I was able to grow that love really through UIC and through opportunities there. And from afar became very much a lover of UIC and its commitment to the highest quality education, research, and care to the widest breadth, right, which is our mission statement. And so volunteered, came in as an MPH student. I made an MPH in epidemiology degree, online option before COVID and before UIC wanted to have an online option, if you will. And they were super, again, compassionate and kind when I was a student, just doing what I could do, being in Seattle, but being in love with Chicago and epi specifically in Chicago. And then came here. Sorry, you asked for my story. So sorry, Cenia, I can make a Cuban speed. I can make a real long story real short, right? Pero para todo lo que tengo, ¿sabe? I got my MPH long distance. I moved here with no job, no prospects, right, in 2015, but a goal that I was going to have UIC fall in love with me as much as I loved UIC. I was going to have Chicago take me on. So I had my last semester as an MPH student as well as a postdoc, finishing up my postdoc there. And I don't know, 2015, 10 years. That's how long I've been at UIC. I convinced folks that I should graduate as an MPH with a number of postdoctoral years of experience in doing community health sciences, about 10, and that they should take me as an MPH alum within a semester to become faculty. And they did. So today I stand as an associate professor in community health sciences, associate director of community outreach and engagement at our cancer center, and associate director of community engaged leadership at community engaged research at the Mouse Square Health Center, one of the oldest, but one of the few academic FQHCs in the nation, and one of the big partners and lovers of SPH, I should say, from the Mouse Square team. And yeah, I love it. I came into public health through engagement with students and as faculty. And so being in the place that I love, being in the university that I love, means a lot to me, and being connected to students who are the current as well as future leaders, not just future, but current leaders, is a joy. So thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me babble a little bit.
I'm the last one, Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts. This is my fourth year at UIC as a clinical associate professor. Also, Chicago is home, but I wasn't born in Chicago. I was born in Nigeria. Immigrated here at a very young age. So I always use the term I'm a 1.5 transnational Nigerian American, because I came here at a young age, and I grew up, started at Uptown, moved to the South Side, and I grew up in Chicago in the community, and did, after all my education, decided to leave. I did all my education in Champaign-Urbana, decided to leave and go to Florida, did my postdoc training there, and then went to upstate New York, where I was there for the past 5 years, and had an opportunity to come back home to Chicago when my family and I were kind of at a crossroads during the pandemic. And the community, the village, right? And in terms of a lot of the work that I do is about the immigrant experience and how it factors in as determinants of health and health outcomes. And but it's something that, again, I say it's always me search, not research, because it's personal for me. And so being able to have an opportunity to come in and come back to the crib, as I call it, and be around my community was an opportunity that I could not pass on. And so when my family decided we wanted to come back, UIC was a place similar to what Dr. Tran mentioned in terms of that representation, and wanting to come back and serve the community in my own way. And I felt like the place that gave me the opportunity to be able to do that was UIC. And so I pretty much came in. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. This was the only job I applied for, so it was either this or nothing, right? And so, and fortunately, things have it that I'm here, and I love to, like I said, I do a lot of work on immigrant health and culture and health. But I'm very passionate about mentoring. I'm very passionate about community engagement, student engagement. This is what I do. I love it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And UIC has allowed me to, at least at this stage, be authentically me, and that is something that I value. I've always wanted to be, and I know we'll get into a lot of things later, but one of the biggest things that I've always said to myself and to others is that I've always wanted to be able to change the way students perceive what a professor looks like, and so that's always been my personal mission, is to be able to allow students who are from the same communities that I am to be able to see me and see not just themselves, but just be able to see their experiences also reflected and related in these spaces where they always been told that they don't belong, or they're always the only individuals there, the token in those classrooms. And so being able to have this opportunity and this platform to be able to be seen and also allow my students to be seen has been a very important thing for me, along with everything else that I do.
Thank you so much for sharing, y'all. I think y'all all bring like a piece of yourselves to the conversation today. So I'm really excited to get to explore what that looks like, not only within your work, but in the mentorship that you provide to students, and even the relationship amongst y'all selves, like in terms of faculty and how that looks like as well. So I guess to start off the conversation today, I just kind of want to pick y'all's brains in terms of can you share a moment when you feel especially connected to your students? It can be a specific moment, a year that you felt specifically connected to them, anything like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll start us off. So I did not want to be a professor. I had the opportunity to guest lecture when I was finishing my PhD in a public policy class, and I ended up I was asked to teach qualitative methods and policy research. And I talked about how different governments use qualitative methods like focus groups and interviews to understand how immigrants want language access in public goods. And I use that as an example because I'm the child of Vietnamese refugees, right? And I grew up in a place where everyone around me was Vietnamese. My aunts, uncles, cousins all lived on the same street. All my neighbors are Vietnamese. My dentist, my washer, laundromat, dentist, pediatrician, everyone around me was Vietnamese. And that really shaped my world for the first decade of my life. And Yami, if you're from from Miami or from Florida, I just assume that there's this my world just felt so Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. And then at 8 or 9, I left. And I left to a community where no one around me was Vietnamese. There was no Vietnamese grocery store, no Vietnamese restaurant, no Vietnamese in my life. I spoke Vietnamese before I ever spoke English. My grandma was my roommate. And that was the first time where me being a teacher, getting to choose what I wanted to teach and how I had to teach qualitative methods. That's what I was told I was assigned to teach. But to do that on my own terms and not to my Vietnameseness and my ability to connect with other people through language, and understanding how relatable that was for my students. So I asked students, how many of you speak a language that's different, that's not English at home? And the number of hands that shot up. And, the examples of should you be able to vote? Should you get a driver's license? Should you be able to apply for a library card? Should your bus routes be available in other languages? Was not just a theoretical moment of does my experience matter? Do these types of experiences matter? I think that forever changed the fact that if I'm in front of the classroom, at least I'll have the freedom to choose to teach in a way that is really relatable to the students that I imagine to be at the center of that universe. And that was what pushed me to say, okay, maybe I can be a professor. Maybe I should be a professor. Maybe I should go down this line of thinking.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't, it's a very interesting thing to ask. It's a great question because I'm thinking about it when haven't I ever felt connected to my students, right? For me, at least, right? My situation. But I think, some key moments, I think things that immediately come to my mind as far as my memory goes. My second year here, I've taught in other places and I can speak to that, but specifically here, when we're talking about just my second year, my second cohort, I think that was a group that was very, compared to my first group, and I love them all, but that was a very extroverted bunch, and I think the conversations that we would have in our classes, 421, and I think being able to especially get into conversations related to like our intersecting identities, right? So I was able to really speak on multiple levels and connect with students relating to the immigrant experience, right? When I talk about some transnational connections and growing up immigrant, and similar to, just being in those enclaves where everything we see and expectations that are set from us by our immigrant families, and then taking it to a level of being black, being a person of color, and those experiences, or growing up on the south side, but then also growing up on the north side, right? Like, so even there were different levels and different areas in which I was able to build those connections and have real conversations with students about what those experiences are like and how those experiences translate in terms of why they're here, right? I think one of the things that's always really interesting about community and public health is that most times, right, it's not something that you automatically run to. Like, nobody just run into public health just off of the top of their head. It's usually a response to something. Like, it's like there's an origin story behind it that led to you saying, you know what, like, I got to do something about this, right? So then you turn into public health. And so a lot of people have these stories that I always love to listen to and hear. And I'm like, what was that for you? And then how did you get here? And those experiences that you have that kind of led or paved the path for you to be in this room, this classroom. Let's talk about that, right? So you understand what belonging looks like. Because I think sometimes when you get into these fields, you don't realize that your experience is also you're part of your expertise. Like, you have some expertise because it's public health. Now, you may not necessarily have the words or the buzzwords or the equipment, but you have some expertise based off your lived experiences, right? So being able to use those conversations to empower the students has always been a really good and easy pathway to build those connections. So I've always felt in some way, shape, or form just connected to them because we're able to have these realistic human conversations, and so it doesn't feel like I'm talking at you, but I'm talking with you.
Yeah, I'll go last, and I'll teach you two pieces there. So my immediate answer is not particularly inspiring, but hopefully is relatable in this, which is the most common way in which I relate with my students is whenever I teach a class and I make jokes, because most of my jokes, and this gets to Dr. Tran's point, they're definitely cultural and they're definitely grounded in the Spanglish perspective. So I talk about fulanita all the time. For example, if you know fulanita, you know fulanita, right? Para eso. So I do a lot of wordplay, right? And all of my wordplay is very Spanglish, right? I do all these like problem stories, yada, yada, yada. I'm always talking about Juanita and Maria and fulanita, right? And my joy in life is when I hear a smirk from a Spanish speaker when they first read my questions, because then we know, you know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about what we share, we're laughing at it, right? And the jokes that I have, right, are very much grounded in who I am, right, in so many ways. In terms of other identities, right? When I make jokes, right, about whether you're a part of the family, right? And when I'm talking about being a part of the family, what I'm talking about is the rainbow family, right? And if you know, do you know what I'm saying? And so I teach with a lot of joking because I'm an introvert that was put into socially extroverted spaces, but I'm really an introvert in life. So jokes are my coping mechanism. Really being very, very social is my coping mechanism because I really need to be recharging somewhere, actually. So that is how I connect, really, is through shared jokes, through shared spaces, right? Where we can talk about it through living it and through being it, right? I will say that the piece that maybe is more fundamental and more helpful-ish in the long run is that I connect with my students whenever we can hang out on a really seemingly dry topic, such as research methods or public health planning. I teach really methods-based classes, and let me tell you, no one's excited. I get it. But I connect really when students not finally, but when students are able to engage with it, when I really say that math is community investment and that program planning and stats are community investment, because the best way to get money to our communities is to show a stat. And the best way for us to serve our community that serves, and here I'm talking about promotores más que nada, right? The best way we can serve the people who are out there doing the work is to provide them with the data to show that what they're doing works and makes an impact, right? And so that's why these dry classes are so valuable, even though they're annoying, even though there's so many concentric circles making us less interested in them at the moment, right? And so when I see students in the class or even beyond, when they like reach out to me a couple years later, and they're like, Mira, okay, this logic model, I get it. I finally get why I needed to do this logic model. It got us 100 grand for this org. And I'm like, dale, right? Like, palante. So that is my connection, right? Is like, let's think about all these methods and all these classes that maybe are very theoretical. They're going to get our communities paid, right? And payment and investment matters.
You all kind of gave a little bit of, in your own way, how you connect with your students, and it's really nice to hear in the varied senses. And I think this is also a varied question too. Maybe this is easier for some, maybe this is not for others. But how do you balance being a mentor with maintaining professional boundaries, and maybe speaking from the point of like students, right? There's those of us students who like want to get to know you. You're probably the only person in the room they've ever seen, and so like they might want to just get a little bit more. But how do you balance that relationship with those professional boundaries?
I can start. I don't have boundaries, which is the problem. That's probably it. So, you know, my problem in life is that I have no boundaries and I have no time. So if there is an inability to connect, it is more a time constraint than not. But, you know, somebody who knows what it's like to not necessarily know where you're sleeping at night, how to eat. I have no boundaries. If people are coming and if I'm sharing and they come and respond to me with that, I'm cool. If they just want to hang out and joke, I'm cool, you know? And most times, you know, awkward introverts bond together, especially awkward introverts at different intersections of identity. So if I can, I will. I'm really bad at boundaries.
Ditto. I mean, no, like seriously, right? I think so. What I tell I've mentored so many, right? And I'm sure you know Yami and Nathaniel, y'all do the same. But for me, it's especially people from my community, right? It's like I said, it's personal, right? And so of course, I take you. My saying is that I take you as seriously as you want me to take you, right? And so, but that doesn't mean that we can't be unserious. There are times for that, but yeah, it's really not. It's a we thing. And once we're locked in, and it's a life thing, right? So a lot of times people and students that I mentor, we grow together. And so I'm still growing, you're still growing, and I'm really big in this concept of greater than yourself, meaning I'm gonna give you whatever I can to make sure that you're better than me, right? And because we all eat together, it's not a situation where you're not my competition, you're not, you know, you're my collaborator, right? Potential, you know, it's not a succession type of thing. It's just how can I lift you as I'm moving forward, and how can you lift me, right? So students, I always want to know, like, what do you want to, I always say, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Because even if you 35 years old in grad school, what you trying to do, right? And then how can I help you with that? And what resources can I provide? But more importantly, what's going on? What's the tea in your life? Because that matters, right? Especially from people, you know, from the communities where I come from. It's not just, we don't have the luxuries of just being able to really compartmentalize everything. We read books and try to learn how to figure it out, but that's not how it works. So it's really, I always care about all the things that impact and influence your life, right? And so being able to have that conversation, being able to talk about other things, right? Even if we just got to like joke and kiki about certain conversations. Let's talk about what's happening on social media. Like, it doesn't matter, but let me provide an escape for you. And then let's figure out how to handle business together. So it's really hard to set boundaries in those regards. If you need something, I want to be there for you. And I usually try to make time. It's not easy as life goes on and you got your own, you know, your kids are growing, other things, but my mentees know what's up, and they understand that once we're in it together, and it doesn't, and I always say, you're stuck with me, right? So it's one of those situations that when I see a student that is looking for that guidance, sometimes they're shy or sometimes they don't know how to go about it. So I'm usually the one that starts that, and we set up a meeting and say, hey, let's just chop it up. Let's talk about, you know, what do you want to do? Like, how are things going? How are things working for you navigating this school or this program? And then just we grow from there. And, you know, usually if you need more assistance or you're looking for more guidance, I ask that. I'm very straightforward. Like, do you have a mentor? Do you have somebody that can kind of support you in that? And if they say yes, they say no, then we just see, like, what does that look like? What can I do to continue to help and build and support you in that way? and then it just organically takes off, right? So it's not really, I ain't got no boundaries like that, except for Sundays when I'm watching football. Leave me alone. But other than that, right, like it's all good. So yeah, I'm very much so similar to Yami as far as I struggle with that from time to time, actually all the time.
I think something that you said that really resonates is like we eat together, right? Like I think that like it is such a I'm only here like sometimes I look I'm so early into my career and I am so surprised by how far like I could not have dreamed 20, 15, 10-year-old me just did not imagine this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that it sounds like many of us are caught on the other end of this is that we want to pour so much into others and to give so much to others and to open as many doors as possible and to watch folks um, run further than we could possibly have ever done and run faster than we could have also ever done and fly higher than we possibly could have imagined for ourselves. And so we're willing to really, really pour, like, to give because we want to see that. I think even so to that first notion of is like we eat together is like truly it is like a communal victory. I think that that's something that is like I think particularly as researchers, there could be a mindset where you're like, well, someone's going to write that paper before me. Someone's going to scoop that idea. Someone's going to scoop, and I'm like, there's more than enough ideas out there. I think that like to shift away from like I have to be the first paper or the biggest paper or the whatever. That is not that. I think I even before I started in this job is like I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be. And part of being a professor, so then the other half of this is like just as how I am in the world is met with like maybe I don't have to write that paper. I don't have to lead that idea. I don't have to be the first to do that. I can help someone else learn the tools, right? This comes back to something Yami said is that like I think I see myself as an educator because it makes us capacity builders. We're increasing the capacity of folks to go out and affect positive change in the world in their own communities, right? Like we could have a really paternalistic public health that is positions who have all people who have always been in positions of power to go out and affect change, whether the communities want to be affected by those changes or not. And I come to UIC and in front of me, I see my students who are like, Chicago born and raised or Midwest born and raised. I'm going to go back to my hometown, go back to my community, go back to my neighborhood, and I want to affect change. And they come here to this, this temple of knowledge, and I say, but what skills are interesting to you? What pathways are interesting to you? What tools can I help you build and practice and iterate on, so that you can go and do good, more good than I could ever do by myself? Yeah. And I think that is so when I think about like we eat together is like if I'm good at my job, if I'm good at uplifting and building folks up, they will go on to do good and build around for them and for generations to come. More beyond than I will ever see in just my own career, my own life, my own citation count. Because that is like that is one measure of our productivity, but that is the soft and measurable is like building people up. Because people saw they opened doors for me, doors that I didn't want to walk through, doors that I didn't know existed, and doors that I certainly did not think that I could walk through and continue to walk like beyond, right? Like those folks saw that, and I think that's what being an educator and being a teacher is capacity building for generations to come.
Yeah, I love what you said as far as just the not even imagining being here. If you told me, 15 years ago that I was going to be somebody's professor, I would have fought you. Like, because that wasn't my destiny, right? Like in my mind, I was going to be somebody's medical doctor because those were the expectations set for me, by my Nigerian parents. And it's interesting now, even as you say that, right? As I'm thinking about just following on that concept of eating together, one of the things that I always believed is and anyone, when I talk to my students, a lot of times we have those conversations where it's like, man, doc, like, man, I don't know about this academic life. And I'm like, me neither, right? Because I don't, like, I'm trying to think, listen, like, I know why I'm here, right? And I wasn't driven here by not saying I don't love it, but it wasn't my first calling to come here because I was strictly loving the academic. I loved my community. And I saw an avenue in which I felt the transnational path. I felt I can give back and do something. But I also found a path that I felt like this is an arid, vast land that nobody has been able to really take advantage of. I have opportunities to be able to connect with, young children of immigrants or those who care about these immigrant experiences. And we can all take over. We can find our own lanes. And if I can help be facilitator of that, similar to what you mentioned, then I don't gotta be first author. I don't care about that. Like that ain't, you know what I mean? I understand the game, but that's not my ultimate, that's not what gives me the most joy. The most joy is when I'm able to say, hey, we're having, a meeting, or we're having a function, or we're having something going on, a community gathering, and I'm able to bring in and invite all the people that I've been able to contribute to their growth, the people who I've been able to be a part of their journey. And it's a large number of people who came in saying like, man, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to do this. And now here I am at Brown University, or wherever wherever you're at, doing something, being somebody's, practitioner. Like that gives me so much joy. Or when I get a call from one of my students who's like, we got in, we got into this university, or we got the job, right? Notice that we say we, like we did this, right? And that is the joy for me. I feel a lot more pride in that than, being able to write a paper. Now, if one of my students put it together and we're able to support, and they're able to move forward with this because this was an important part of their career growth, that gives me a lot more joy. So that's why I feel like we can all eat together and survive and thrive. So I loved what you said, Nathaniel, about that. It means it just strikes a note.
Yeah, I actually, as a student, I want to respond a little bit to that, because I think I'm watching right in real time this happen from your ends of like wanting more for us. And I was telling Dr. Tran this morning, like, so one activity I've really appreciated that they do is show a job description every once in a while, and be like, how, do you feel prepared to like apply for this job? Do you want this job? And I think there is a lot of nervousness from like students as they answer, like, I don't know if I could do this. And today he was a little flustered. He's like, I'm teaching you how to do this. You should know that this. And everyone's like, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? Like we were all kind of like taken aback, like in the best way, because I feel like it's a dual-edged sort of like, here's the thing, here is what it wants from you, like you are very capable of doing that, and like also like we need you in these spaces. And so it's just really neat to just kind of like experience what you're saying on the other side, and being able to like affirm that, and also to just notice how I think that maybe this is something that might be interesting if you want to tease this out, but like there is this idea that like, we look up to you as, as professors of color, and we're also seeing like a new way of like learning. Cause I mean, growing up, all my teachers were white in like Cicero, Illinois, Pilsen, Chicago, Illinois, where like everyone else was Latino. And so this is a first, even from college. And so I'm just curious to hear a little bit about that. Like, do you feel that like authority, for lack of a better term, you have in being this like pioneer, and being in this person who's like really showcasing and trailblazing for us? I think sometimes we're like enamored, sometimes we're intimidated, sometimes we're like scared, but at the end of the day, you still all feel very approachable. I know I said a lot, so feel free to tease out whatever part resonated with you.
And sorry, just to kind of piggyback off that too, I really like, Nancy, how you said like trailblaze, pioneer, because very much when I was hearing y'all speak, I kept thinking like, did you find this path or did you create this path? Because that's two separate things. And I feel like a lot of y'all mentioned like it felt like y'all found y'all created this path, right? Like you made this for yourself. You found a way to make academia your own. So
yeah, thank you. And Nancy and Cenia, I want to say publicly on this how amazing this information sharing is, because the two of you and your thoughts on this, they've just been critical. They've been shaping and moving me, right? So in terms of trailblazing in that bi-directional way, right? I feel like for me as faculty, the charge for me is really showing people that failing is okay, that you can own making mistakes, because you are not a mistake, right? You are not wrong. You are not evil if you are wrong once in a while, right? I think that when I was growing up, teachers, doctors, whatever, right? They were perfect, even when they weren't perfect, even when they misdiagnosed my family repeatedly, even when they made assumptions about who I was. I had a doctor when I first got diagnosed with diabetes who was like, you are type 1 diabetic, but you're Latina. So I ran it twice. You're really type 1, but you're Latina. And like, literally said this for like 2 or 3 minutes. Here I am. I'm a 22-year-old who had no idea what diabetes was, but I knew that I didn't like that. Do you know what I mean? And afterward, I was trying to show compassion and grace and being like, this must have been a hard concept. Like you weren't trained, right? And how to talk about that and how to think about that as a provider, right? So let's like think about it. Let me like be sympathetic, right? So for me, I feel like now that I'm in the spot, like I make so many mistakes, like all the time. I think actually, Nancy, you've seen me make a million mistakes through the Health Equity Zones project on there, right? Like I get passionate and I say things and then I rethink things, right? I say things and I make a mistake and then I own that mistake, right? And I want that to be okay. I want being passionate and being emotional to not be the opposite of being logical and of being right and of being strong. I want us to like hold all of that together, right? And I want us to be in spaces, right, where we can be vulnerable and we can be comfortable, right? And, you know, we can clap back, right? And also understand that clapping back may not be the best way to get to somebody, right? So depending on where you are, right, and how you are, right? And so I feel like for me, like all the emotional intelligence that I wanted other people to show me how to get is what I try to do. Not that I am emotionally intelligent, right? I would actually put that on Kelechi and Nathaniel more than me, right? But where I try to grow, right, is really highlighting so much of being a leader, so much of being of trailblazing, right, is also understanding everyone that has put you on the road. You know what I mean? In terms of our ancestors, academic and family and otherwise, our peers, right? And that sunshine that we're walking to, right? All the people in the future that are going to be taking it forward from you, right? And it's okay if you stumble because we together, we stumble and we jump right back up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, as far as trailblazing goes, I can't really, with like with all certainty, tell you if I'm trailblazing or not. I really, because I'm always humbled when I meet, someone who's been doing this for a very long time, and I get to talk to them and I learn, a lot of times, and the times really play a major role. I think I'm fortunate to be able to be a faculty member during this time period where there's a little bit more tolerance for someone who looks like me to be able to, talk the way they talk. But I see other brothers and sisters and families, and I say family in terms of people from our communities, but who I talk to who are faculty or just, in their respective fields. And when I listen to how they had to work through certain barriers, it humbles me and I'm fortunate because they definitely, walk so I can run type of thing, or, and so I'm not entirely sure, but I do feel fortunate to be able to be in spaces where I have a student come to me and tell me, like throughout my whole life, you're the first Black professor I had. Not only that, you're the first Black male professor I've ever had, right? Like, and that to me is, it's a responsibility that I take seriously. It is something that I own. And when I come to spaces and I teach, I've tried my best to be very clear about that, right? And I try to share my biases, right, because of my experiences and my different identities. And so I think I don't entirely know if I'm trailblazing, but I definitely know that I'm being myself. I'm thoroughly being myself. I have this ability to code switch and I do it a lot. And I'm able to, we can go from speaking academic language and I switch to Ebonics real quick, right? Or my African accent might come out too, right? So like, depending on the situation and the circumstances, I allow myself to be, to have these multiple identities reveal themselves based off my cultural experiences. And I never really received any type of backlash for it. So I'm always grateful to be able to have those environments. And I think a lot of students always appreciate that, right? Because I'm able to really, I take academic language and I just convert it. I just kind of say it in my own words, what this means and how I feel about it. And then also try to gauge how students feel about it. And it always just leads to, I think I'm just I am emotionally intelligent, and I definitely am sure, if I didn't believe it, I see it in my son. So now I know that it had to come from somewhere, right? So, but yeah, so I definitely have that sense, and I do try to apply it in the spaces that I'm in. And so far it's been, it's been a positive experience in that regard. And most students tend to really, they gravitate to that.
I think I was taking notes just because I feel so connected to what Yami and Kelechi are saying. Is I think a lot, like they both seem to be pushing back on this term trailblazer, and like they don't want to take up that mantle. That feels like a lot, and at the same time, in a celestial sense, and like an astrophysics sense, is like our molecules ourselves are only in this place, in this position at this time once in eternity, right? Like we're exploding, and we're like pushing out in space and time as we speak. We'll only be here, and so that you're blazing that trail because those molecules, that consciousness will never be there in that time place moment again.
That's real. That's real. That's real.
To Kelechi, what you had said about like code switching and how the registers you speak, the accents in which you speak, something that I think that comes with this trailblazing is, I think this tension between style and substance. And for which I think there's this criticism of academia is that like, if you have style, you must have no substance.
Right.
Or the way that the style that you're coming through must mean that you have no substance. And I think that it makes people really upset and uncomfortable that folks who come to academia with different styles, that's whether how you physically dress, how you show up, how you look, how you speak. And people are like, well, that's not the right format. I can't engage with you. I don't want to engage with your ideas. Your ideas must be inferior.
Yes.
And I think that it makes people really, really mad. But like, I can do that. That's the part of being the outsider to academia is like, I can do it both ways. I was forced to learn and was raised and grown and taught and raised in a certain way. I'll do the thing the way you want me to do the thing, but it's not the natural register of how I want to do the thing.
Facts.
Right? That's one thing that I just like, I really feel that. But, and two, I think there's this piece about, I'm going to say like failing publicly, that it would be a beautiful story if I said that like it was so obvious that I would always be a professor, that I would always get here, that I was always bound for this, destined for this. And I think in spirit of like who I am, maybe, but like my grades and my records do not show that.
Yeah,
right? Like the C's and exams that I failed, I've dropped out of a PhD. I thought I would never come back. Even during the PhD, I tried to drop out. So many times they were like, you're the first cohort, you cannot drop out. We will not let you drop out. And so I think that being able to share that back to students and saying like, it's okay. So those are ways that quote I'm failing. And there are also ways that I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing. I misinterpret ideas. I come back. I think in this last semester, I shut down a student a little too early. I think that I didn't, in the moment, I wasn't trying to shut them down. I was pushing back, and I play often this contrarian role of pushing our students to try and understand why someone has an opposing argument, how they build up an opposing argument. That's not just feelings, that they have a rationale and a logic to their own. And I came back, and that student came back to me and said like, hey, I feel really shut down. And I think that I apologized to them. I think I said, that was not my intention, but it did a harm to you. And that particularly in our power dynamic is like, if I shut you down, you might never grow back from that. You never bounce back from that. Right. And I got to own that to you. And I think that those are moments that like, that's not how the academy looks. That's not how I was taught. There was a certain reverence of professors, of educators who are infallible. They are the fountain of knowledge that spews one way. And I think that part of the new university or part of the new classroom is recognizing it's bi-directional. I learned so much from my students every day. There are facts that I can recite, but that's not the same thing as knowledge, as wisdom, of lived experience that are different than my own, right? And so those two pieces, the style over substance and the failing publicly, that I think that, and in those senses, I think that that's trailblazing, because that's not how the academy was set up for. You won't find that maybe at Oxford or the University of Bologna or University of Paris, like the oldest universities 500 years in the making, maybe don't employ that model, right? And I think in those ways, I think that we can be trailblazers or are trailblazers. And lastly, I'll say to Yami is like, I don't know if I would have taken this job. You were a huge part of why I took this job. I was like, I refuse to be the first, the only in across different dimensions. And I was like, got to have someone else there that's might bat for me or has done the batting and has had to rattle the institution to make sure that, because I didn't want to be the first and the only. So
this conversation has been so beautiful. I love it. It's great. And I think we can take a lot from what everyone has said. I know we're running up on time, but I really want to pick y'all's brains in terms of like, if you had, understanding that representation is an important piece to academia, especially when we are in these spaces or in institutions such as UIC, right? In a city that is so diverse, that is in need of so much resources in some areas, but what advice would you give to like other faculty who want to be more intentional about how they connect to students? If you can think of one thing maybe, and then we can start to wrap up.
I'll start. I think on this last one, something that I really appreciate about UIC is, be kind to everyone that I interact with, whether you're a student, staff, or faculty, because across so many different dimensions of my time here in the last year, a year and a half, is just those folks will come back. And I think that that's not necessarily, that doesn't scare me as much. I think that when I tell people this is sometimes they're like, oh, I got to watch what I'm saying. I'm like, well, if you're you or you're treating people well across every dimension of your life, you're not worried about I was trash talking that one person and now they're, that student is actually now a staff member on my project or program, et cetera. And so I think that's something that's true. Is folks bring something to the table across lots of different dimensions, and to be able to appreciate that, honor that, respect that. It's not just about the credential. I think maybe it's that I feel like me earning my own graduate degree felt so. I was like, that's it. Am I that master of knowledge? Do I have that mastery? And what changed overnight? Versus folks who may never have that degree for lots of reasons and bring so much institutional knowledge. And I think so coming back to what other faculty might take away is just building a strong sense of accountability to folks around you, regardless of that credential, regardless of how important you think they are. It's not just about what they can do for you. Those are folks. Those are smart folks. Those are invested folks. Those are kind folks. Those are folks who really care. And I've been really, really, really impressed and inspired by folks who are so fierce, who hold my feet to the fire, hold me accountable in my work in life. So
I'll go next. I think reflexivity is really key, is the advice I would give, and the advice I give myself to as many people. I'll be real quick, but maybe semi real quick. When I started teaching, it was 2005, right? So about a long time, right? 20 years. We didn't say that out loud. And when I first started teaching, I was a year to -2 years in terms of overlap with the students that I was teaching, because I was a pre-doctoral instructor. And after a semester, they moved me from TA to pre-doctoral instructor, right? Not because I teach so awesomely, but because I'm weird. Anyway, with that in mind, we connected for the first few years on shared experiences, right? Because we were in the same cohort, the same generation, right? So we all lived through 9/11. And then I started teaching younger populations who weren't in college with 9/11, but maybe were in high school, and then they were middle school. And then the last time, and this was a particular class, the psychology of racism I used to teach, I had students who had heard of 9/11 in their textbook, and I was shocked, right? And I think so many of us as faculty, right? Because we see new generations of students, and we also think that they're comparable, but there's so many differences between and within generations of students as there are with us, right? And how they engage with us and how they interact. So just that reflexivity around what is shared and what is not shared, and what is rich and what is varied, is really critical. And then I would just highlight with that, being very reflexive in how you want to be transparent as faculty is really key. And I'll be really very honest about what I do. I'm sure all the admin who listen to this are going to be cringing in their tears, right, around this. So I often open up the class the first day, and I tell them about all my jobs, and I tell them how much everyone pays for every job I have, right? And I think being reflexive, right, as to how you engage, and then being honest about when you cannot engage, right, is critical for authenticity, right, and for transparent conversation, because you're not always going to be on the right, and sometimes we do push over it, right? But I think if students know that it's actually an 80-hour work week for faculty, when you really think about it, and that's not even counting the prep, then there's an appreciation of that. And then there's cross grace, right? Because we can also appreciate the students who are right out on 3 jobs, trying to get their tuition with an RA that pays nothing. I'll stop there. But we can all do some cross grace around what's happening outside of the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that's been said, without just piggybacking off of it, it's really just for me. I usually tell people who really want to invest in building those relationships is, get off your high horse and or share the horse. Like, you're like just, elevate your student to get on that high horse with you, but respect their experiences, consider them, look at them as experts, right? I know that, again, going back to what Nathaniel mentioned in terms of those power dynamics, those things do exist, and they are real, and that's something that we do have to wield delicately. But more importantly, I'm very big on telling people who want to build those relationships. Again, I said it earlier, I don't look at my students as just students. I look at you as my future collaborators, and I think about my kids, right? I think about my kids and I say, man, one of y'all might be mentoring my kids one day, right? And so I have to prepare for that, right? I have a 14-year-old, and we 4 years away from college, and I think about, man, if I can be able to, because as mentioned, it's a tiny world, especially if you come into my field in public health. But in any field, in anything, the world is small sometimes, and I usually just look at each person and say, hey, whatever I can contribute to make you better. I know that in some way, shape, or form, it could potentially come back multiple folds. So just be your authentic, genuine, best self, but also understand that who you're talking with or who you're working with has some potential, some expertise that they can grow into. Does it always happen all the time? Maybe not with you, but you have to be able to see the brilliance that exists in them, that got them here, and then understand that your expertise, I use the term blacksmiths, right? I use that term because we are just here to produce the tools, right? You are those who want to go out there and be whatever they want to be. This space, is meant for us to just generate and create the tools and give it out. And hopefully community members, students, whatever you want to do, you go forth and conquer the world. So I don't see myself as an authority, and I don't communicate with them as an authority, but I always ask for respect, right? You got to respect my journey, right? So when I ask how people address me and whatever the case may be, it's not because I want to just show that I'm better than you when I ask you to address me as Dr. Ibe-Lamberts, but it's because you got to respect my journey just like I respected yours, because you don't know what I went through. and I could spend a whole nother episode telling you what I went through to get this, right? And I want you to understand and appreciate the journey that you're going through right now. And so I always tell any faculty coming in terms of building relationships with the students, these could be people that potentially can elevate you one day, right? So treat them as such, and no, and this should be a human experience. I think one of the community members that we had in our class, Miss Rhonda, mentioned something that stuck with me, and she said, it's not hard work, it's heart work. Right. And that's kind of how I look at it. Right. It is hard work for me when it comes to all the stuff that I do for my students, for my mentees, is from the heart. And so I don't consider it a burden or a pain. Sometimes lives and you don't always have the time because as Yami mentioned, it's tough what the expectations are for us as faculty, and the demands in terms of, being able to also feed your family. But the reality is a lot of times we want the best for our students, and we try to make it work. So have some grace, 360.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. I know we're just winding down here, and we really appreciate all you've had to say. And honestly, it felt a little like I was sneaking a colleague conversation. So thank you for your vulnerability in front of us as students as well. And just to wrap it up, I'll pass it to Cenia if there's any last final thoughts, but we just wanted to thank you for your time. And then that's all I wanted to say on my end.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much. I really appreciate the conversation today, and just getting to pick everyone's brain about, what it means to be, like, I guess, a mentor at UIC, what it means to be authentically yourself at UIC, and how you can present to your students to build that connection. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank y'all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Take care, folks.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into Community Level. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. Join us next time as we continue to explore the intersection of research and community action. Until then, stay connected and stay level-headed.